Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
And welcome back, everybody. I'm sure you've seen commercials before for personal injury lawyers. And maybe you've been in a situation where you need one. Maybe you think you need one. Maybe at some point in your life, you may. When we say personal injury, it goes deep. There's lots of, not just a slip and a fall, can be, but there's a lot of other situations that come under that category. How do you pick one of those attorneys? What are the questions you ask? We're going to ask those questions of somebody that's got over 4 decades of working in this area. He is one of the most respected trial attorneys in the state of Maryland. He's licensed to help in other areas as well, and he fights hard for his clients and gets it done. He is our diamond of the decade. Paul Bekman joins us on the program. Hey, Paul, welcome back. How are you?
Good to be here. Good to see you, Steve.
You too. And I really mean that. It's been a while since we've gotten together. And I've learned so much. We've even talked about some major cases, the bridge collapse in Baltimore a few months ago, and so much more. But let's boil it down to the basics here today. We've all seen those commercials with those attorneys. Situations come up, in those commercials, and we kind of apply it to ourselves. What if that happened to me? What's your overall feeling on that kind of advertising and these attorneys that we see?
Well, it's interesting because for a very, very long time, it was not permissible to advertise at all. And the Supreme Court back in the 80s came up with a decision that permitted quote unquote professionals to advertise. It included lawyers. It also included doctors and other professionals. And then things started to change. And I'm sure the public has seen all types of advertisements that run the gamut from cars crashing into one another, people being injured, explosions, etc. And the individual who watches TV, listens to the radio, all types of media, goes on the internet, lawyers are everywhere. They're everywhere advertising. And the fact that they advertise, quite frankly, may not mean that they are totally equipped to handle a person's case. And that gets to the point of what does somebody do to determine what lawyer they're going to choose for what they believe to be a viable personal injury related case, whether it be personal injury, whether it be medical malpractice, whether it be product liability. And there are a lot of different ways to do it. One might think, well, I saw billboard advertising. No. I heard a radio advertisement. No. I heard some people on TV. No. What does that tell you about their expertise, about what they have done? And that's where, if you're serious about looking for an attorney, you've got to do a little work yourself. There are a variety of sources that you can use to identify the person in the field that you are looking for. What do I mean by that? Well, for example, there's been an organization that has been in existence for almost 40 years called Best Lawyers of America. Best Lawyers of America are selected by a panel in the particular state. This is every state in the union. This is in every category you can imagine exists in the practice of law. Not just personal injury, medical malpractice, products liability, but complex civil litigation, zoning, admiralty, all types of individuals in a category. That should be your first stop. Is this person recognized by his peers, not because he wrote in and said, put me on the list, but because this group determines who is accepted in the category that you may be dealing with. And it's not hard to do it. There is also a whole host of other organizations that has been involved in certifying lawyers within a particular area. And to be certified within area is a very good example of the kind of lawyer you may want. The American Board of Trial Advocacy is one of the national organizations. There was an organization called the National Board of Trial Attorneys that was created in 1980. And in order to be certified by the National Board, you had to take a 6-hour test of your ability related to being a trial lawyer. So as it turned out, I happened to have done that in 1980 in the first group at Georgetown Law School. Went there, took the test, passed the test, and was the first lawyer certified in Maryland to be accepted to the National Board. But there are others. There's the American Board of Trial Advocates. There's Chambers USA. There is Law Dragon. There is super lawyers. Super lawyers, little less regimented than others. It's limited to the top 5% in a particular jurisdiction. They do have a board, and there are a lot of very fine lawyers identified there. But the highlight, if you will, is an organization called the American College of Trial Lawyers. It's a national organization. It's been in existence since about 1950. So it's almost 75 years old. Nobody applies to be there. Nobody knows that they've been recommended. A panel of committee members in the state, which is limited to 1% of the lawyers in the state, meet and do a recommendation to have one of their lawyers investigate this particular person. What do? They contact the lawyer's law firm, talk to one of their partners, talk to somebody who knows, get a case list of every case they have tried, every case, and the judge and the opposing counsel in that case. They interview the judge, they interview the opposing counsel.
Wow.
And they go through it. And then it's then recommended to the College Board of Regents, who then does a separate investigation of the individual himself or herself and contacts everybody, because there may be recent cases that they have tried, and particularly cases that they've tried against other members of the American College. I did that in 1993, and I was on the state committee. I was chair of the state committee, and then I became a regent, and I did those investigations. And I can tell you that they then get presented to the Board of Regents in person, and the board can absolutely deny somebody because of an investigation that may have been done, or the lawyer would recommend that they not be passed, and that's the way it works.
Wow. Talk about a vetting process.
It is
It's
the
layer.
biggest.
They're
And
layer.
then one of the things, Steve, that, and I've said this to a number of people, this group is very unique. And when you go to one of the national meetings, and they have 2 of them a year, and they have a lot of learned speakers who appear, it's one of the only organizations that I have ever been involved in where people go to the organizational meeting and they don't tell you how great they are. Because they don't have to.
Wow. The one thing that, and that's the one for me. What is that? The American
College of Trial Lawyers. All right.
So
every state has members in all types of areas.
the first one you mentioned, the best something, I'm trying to remember the
Best
name.
Best lawyers in America.
That one, and we're always transparent with each other. I'm always a little skeptical. I have a marketing company, and on the medical side, there's an organization that you can get the emblem on your website. You can get the plaque that comes along with that. You pay for that. And apparently, allegedly, it's the peers in your category that are asked about you. I think there's a little bit of latitude there, pay for play, popularity contest kind of thing going on there. And in my mind, I sort of equate it to the best lawyers. Does that sound like it could be kind of the same?
It's similar, but I have to say that Best Lawyers is restricted. They do their due diligence. It's not like the American College, but they do their due
Okay.
diligence and they look at people in individual categories, all types.
I would have to imagine, even as a baseline, if one lawyer has some things that are not too favorable floating out there, a peer is not going to vote for that attorney because he's casting, his reputation on the line for somebody else.
That's true. And that's why when the lawyers investigate them, not some outside entity,
Sure.
the lawyers are going to know the person or know about the person. And when they do their due diligence, they contact opposing counsel. They contact the judges before whom the case was tried. That gives them that intimate knowledge that they really need to see whether a person gets recommended or not.
Paul, what do you say to somebody in this category, personal injury, that says, yeah, you know what? I don't have to pay unless they make any money anyway. So I'm not even to worry about. I'm just going to pick that one. They seem like a logical, reasonable choice. Seen their ads all the time, but I don't have to pay them up front anyway. It's when they collect. So it seems like there's not a major risk on the client's part. How do you address that?
Well, what I would say is you get what you pay for. And there are varieties and different levels of lawyers. For example, if you meet with that lawyer and you have a serious auto case, let's say,
Hmm.
you may say to the lawyer, well, can you tell me about the experience you've had in handling these cases? Oh, I've handled 100 cases, 500 cases like this. How many of those cases have you tried to a verdict before a jury? What kind of verdicts were you able to achieve?
Hmm.
How much money was offered before you went to trial? Uh, you want to know about that lawyer and their success rate. What are you getting? You know, are you getting the filet mignon
Hmm.
or are you getting the hamburger? And it's just a little due diligence that will help you select a lawyer. There are a lot of very, very fine lawyers out there who
Sure.
do this. And that group is a closed group that you can find and you can identify. You're not going to find them in the yellow pages.
Hmm.
You're not going to find them on the billboards. You're not going to find them listening to the radio or to TV. You got to do a little due diligence and then you'll be able to identify the lawyer. And sure, there may be people the word of mouth, this person is really good. That's fine, but let me find out some more information about them. What experience do they have? Similar to this, Steve, here's an analogy. I'm going to have surgery and I need to have a really good orthopedic specialist do this surgery. Do you want to know whether or not that doctor does that surgery? How often he may do it? How regularly he does it? Those are the kind of things that
Hmm.
everybody should want to know because there are a lot of physicians, orthopedic surgeons, who do very limited types of work and they may not do it all the time. If I'm going to have it done, I want the pro. I want the guy that's done it before, that's got a very good success rate. He has a low infection rate. You can find all this out, and that's the person you pick. And then you got the right person.
So, question based on that. I've experienced this in other legal categories, not personal injury. I've never had to retain a lawyer for that. I guess that's fortunate. But in another category, retained a firm, thought I was working with this person. I wasn't. I got spun off to somebody else, then to somebody else. The outcome, quite honestly, wasn't what I expected. I mean, I'm talking about the legal outcome at that time. How does that work with personal injury? Is that something we have to watch out for?
It's a good question to ask because when the potential client comes in the office, I get this all the time. Are you going to be able to handle my case? What I say to them is, I will handle your case. I will have assistance. For example, I have 3 full-time nurses in my office who
Wow.
work with me on medical malpractice cases and who have 30 years experience and will be looking at the records and may be in contact with you. I have legal assistants who may be in contact with you. But if your case goes to trial, I will be the one who will be trying it. That's what they want to hear, and that's what'll happen. If the case is prepared properly and the case is done in the right way in preparation for trial, depositions, discovery, documents, your ability to depose other people and get admissions and concessions, you find that virtually 90% of the personal injury cases are settled. That does not apply to medical negligence cases, but general personal injury, trains, planes, trucks, cars, that type of thing. But if you get into the medical area, it's a whole different ballgame. And it's very, very contested and very, very difficult. And there are a very small group of people who handle it. And we do, and we've handled it for a long time. And we know when you're in there, we've got to do our due diligence before we file a lawsuit. We have to have the experts lined up to testify that we know, not just one, we have 2 at least on this question of responsibility, because that, number 1, will confirm that we are right and that the other side will know that we will be able to present a good case with good experts. That's a big step up, but a lot of people don't do it that way and they get knocked out.
Speaks volumes to me in that you have 3 full-time nurses on staff just to go through the medical data. Wow. So what are some of the other questions that somebody should ask of a personal injury attorney before they retain one?
Well, one of the things they may ask is my case going to go to court? Is it going to have to be tried before a jury? Answer to that depends solely on what the investigation reveals, what the discovery reveals. And you have to be able to say, if your case warrants it, it will be our recommendation that you go to trial. And that always brings into question the offers of settlement during the case. And as during the case from the beginning, the middle, in the case, even right before the end. I just settled the case. I was in trial for 2 weeks and we had finished closing arguments. The case was about to go to the jury and we settled the case. And that can happen anytime in any case. But the decision as to whether or not to settle the case is up to the client. We will give our recommendation. We will tell them why we think you should do X, Y, or Z, but the decision is yours. This is your case.
That being said, how often, and I know this is not scientific, but in terms of percentage, how often a case gets settled before it goes to the jury?
I would say, if we put medical negligence cases aside, probably 90%.
Wow.
And if they're worked up right, that should be the record that you have. There are just some cases, for any one of a number of reasons, that are going to be tried, whether because of a difficult client or a difficult insurance company on the other side, or someone who believes that they've got the clincher and they're going to go ahead and try the case. But it's really a crapshoot. In our state, we have 6 people that make up the jury. Not 12, 6.
Wow.
And those 6 people are basically picked at random. They're asked questions by the court that are provided by counsel. But the only qualification for that person to be a juror is that they be above the age of 18, that they be a resident of the state, that they have a driver's license, and otherwise, Katie bar the door. Everybody is eligible, no matter what their age. Certainly questions can be asked which may identify certain characteristics that you may not want in a jury. For example, somebody may be asked if they've ever been involved in an automobile accident before. And if so, they're generally brought to the bench and they're questioned about it. Were they the person who sued? Were the person who be sued? Would it affect their ability to be fair and impartial in deciding the case? And sometimes you look at them and they say yes, and you know that they mean no. And that's where, picking a jury can be extremely helpful. As an aside, most states have what are called individual voir dire, individual questioning of jurors. We don't have that in our state, but it looks like it's coming. We've been working on it for a long time. I've done it before. I tried a case in New York for 5 weeks, and we had individual voir dire, and it was very, very helpful to be able to see somebody face to face, talk to them face to face, ask them questions that they would expect to be asked, and have them go ahead and
Wow.
answer the question. And very helpful.
Is it usually advantageous to settle before it goes to a jury?
Well, that depends on you, Steve. Do you think that this amount of money that is being offered to you is fair and reasonable? What are the problems or pitfalls that may arise in the case? Are there questions relating to contributory fault, which could preclude you from recovering? Did you not mitigate your damages by going to work when you were discharged from the doctor and you built up your wages? Was your treatment all necessary? Do the problems that you have, are they permanent or are they temporary? But the final decision is yours as to what you want to do, knowing all of these issues that may affect your decision to settle the case. And we try to make sure that the client is well advised, because the client is deposed. They have their deposition, their question and answer under oath taken by the other side. How do they do? How do they react? Are they a good witness? A lot of time it's because they're prepared properly. I always meet with clients for several hours ahead of time, and I take them through it just the way I would be asking if I were the defense lawyer, so they know exactly what they're going to be confronted with. Identifying the points which may be hard to deal with in your case is critical to having the person know and understand how to deal with them. That's part of preparation. That's part of trial prep routine.
Are there some cases that the fault is always a challenge, especially, I believe, with transportation issues in some states? I'm just trying to remember what that was. And I believe you may have said that before about the state of Maryland. Can you elaborate on that?
Yes. So there is a doctrine in the law called contributory negligence. Contributory negligence means you were at fault even if the other person was 99% at fault. If you're 1% at fault, you lose. A rear ender, for example, you're rear-ended. What if you made a sudden stop for whatever reason? You dropped something on the floor and you made a sudden stop, you put on the brakes and somebody slammed in the back of you. Well, would that be considered contributory fault? Could be. As opposed to you sitting at the light, waiting for it to change, and a dump truck comes through and smashes into the back of your vehicle. No problem there. But yes, Maryland is very strict. There are 10 states that have it. 40 states don't. And we've been trying to get rid of it for a long time. Wow. And there are also problems, Steve, in what are called limitations, caps on damages, where the legislature has said you can't recover more than X dollars. And there are a lot of states that have those. Maryland has those as well. So when I read about the verdicts in my neighboring states of Delaware, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Virginia, they don't have caps. Virginia has it in medical negligence cases, but not other cases. District of Columbia, no cap. So it can make a big difference in the recovery for the person, and they need to know and understand that. Why can't I get that? Well, that's the law. What if I go into the U.S. District Court? Well, the U.S. District Court applies the state law. That applies. So you're bound by it. So you have to be careful. You have to know what you can get, what you can't get, and then make the best decision, best recommendation that you can make.
All that being said, that's why you need to make the right choice when it comes to your attorney. I mean, what you just said, somebody sitting at a light rear-ended by a dump truck, everybody has cameras now in their homes. What if you're sitting there and you took your foot off the brake for a second? Maybe you moved a little bit, whatever it might be, and they see your tail lights went off and came back on. I mean, 1%. Concerning. Very concerning.
And here's another thing, Steve, and I'm sorry to have to say this, but sometimes when people tell you what happened in their case, they have not told you the truth. So an example, had a case, young man driving a motorcycle. He was making a left turn, told me he was going 30 in the 35 zone. He made a left turn. He was creamed by another vehicle going through a light that he said was red, and he ended up in the hospital. He was operated on. He had over $100,000 in medical bills, and he had a permanent disability, couldn't return to work. And in the accident report, they're listed 5 witnesses. First thing I did, this is a serious case, I sent out my investigator to talk to these 5 witnesses. I said, I want you to get written statements. And he went out, got the written statements from all 5 of them, and they all 5 said the same thing. He passed me going 65 miles an hour. He was weaving in and out. He made a left turn against a red light, and then he got hit by somebody who had the right of way. Now, with that information, I regrettably had to tell him that I could not take his case, that the statements had been obtained, and there is no way he was going to not be found contributorily at fault, and maybe not the other driver at fault at all. Rare, but it happens.
Well, people are doing, or should, due diligence when selecting an attorney for many of these cases. Same thing on the other side. If you took that case and then it was exposed that this guy's doing 65, not 30, weaving in and out, that could shine on your record potentially. So you got to make sure. Paul, we're just about out of time. How does somebody connect with you if they have a question? Just want to go a little bit deeper here. How do they find you?
So just like everything in today's world, you can Google me. Paul Bekman, Bekman. I'm in Baltimore, Maryland. I practice throughout the state of Maryland. I've practiced outside of Maryland, New Jersey, Delaware, Virginia, East Coast, New York. And I handle serious personal injury, wrongful death cases. I'm in Baltimore. My phone number, my website is all available to you on Google. It's Bekman at mdtrialfirm.com. Bekman is Bekman. And it's a real pleasure working with you, Steve.
You too, Paul. I learned so much. I find this fascinating. Maybe in another life I was an attorney. I don't know. But there's so much to consider here and so much on the line that you have to make the right choice. And by the way, I appreciate your clarity. You laser right down where a lot of this, even some of the jargon, some of the situations can be confusing for some. It's clear. You have clarity. And that's part of your calling. Amazing. Thank you so much for being here today.
Great to see you, Steve.
You too. We'll be right back.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house.
And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.